The Supreme Court is not outside American patriarchy. Again and again, it has been one of its strongest protectors. Welcome back to the Revolution Resolution. I'm Malaika Tubbs. Today, I want to talk about one of the most powerful institutions in the country, the Supreme Court of the United States. Because we must understand something clearly. Systems do not protect themselves automatically. People protect them. And throughout American history, many of the people most responsible for protecting patriarchy have been those appointed to interpret the law itself. Many Americans are taught to think of the Supreme Court as neutral, objective, above politics, above ideology. But courts do not emerge outside culture. Judges are not separate from the worldviews they inherit. And the Constitution itself was written by men who explicitly built a hierarchy into the foundation of the nation. So the question has never simply been, what does the Constitution say? The deeper question has always been, whose understanding of humanity shapes how the Constitution is interpreted? This is why debates around the court matter so deeply. Some judges believe the Constitution should evolve alongside society, what is often called the idea of a living Constitution. Others believe the Constitution should be interpreted according to the original intentions of the founders, a philosophy known as originalism. But if the founders themselves created a system centered around white male power, then preserving their original worldview often means preserving the hierarchy they built. Many of the conservative justices openly describe themselves as originalists. Justice Scalia did, Justice Thomas does, Justice Alito does, Justice Kavanaugh, Justice Gorsuch, and Justice Coney Barrett do as well. Again and again, these justices have supported rulings that restrict reproductive freedom, limit protections for marginalized groups, expand executive and institutional power, and preserve older hierarchies under the language of constitutional tradition. And importantly, this protection of patriarchy is not carried out only by white men. American patriarchy has always depended on other people helping sustain it, too. In Erased, I write about how hierarchy reproduces itself generationally through families, institutions, communities, and ideology passed down over time. One example of this appears in the story of Justice Neil Gorsuch and his mother, Anne Gorsuch. Anne Gorsuch became the first woman to lead the Environmental Protection Agency under President Ronald Reagan. But despite breaking gender barriers herself, she strongly opposed feminist policies and worked to dismantle protections she viewed as government overreach. Her son later became one of the youngest Supreme Court justices in recent history, a justice who has repeatedly ruled against women's workplace protections and reproductive freedoms. At his confirmation hearing, Neil Gorsuch openly thanked his mother for shaping his worldview. That matters, because hierarchy survives when people pass allegiance to it down through generations. And we can see similar patterns throughout the modern court. Justice Amy Coney Barrett was elevated to replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg, a woman who, despite valid criticisms and limitations in her own record, spent decades fighting sex discrimination and advocating for expanded rights for women and marginalized groups. Justice Coney Barrett represents almost the opposite constitutional philosophy. Where Ginsburg viewed the Constitution as something capable of evolving toward greater inclusion, Coney Barrett aligns herself with originalist traditions deeply tied to conservative Christian patriarchy. And this distinction is important because courts do not simply interpret society, they shape the conditions people are forced to live within. Who has bodily autonomy? Who has reproductive freedom? Whose marriages are recognized? Whose votes are protected? Whose labor is valued? Whose identities are acknowledged? Whose suffering is taken seriously? These decisions are not abstract. They shape each of our lives. And one of the most important things we must understand before moving forward is this. Many of the people protecting the current hierarchy genuinely believe they are preserving the proper order of society. This is why backlash against liberation movements can feel so intense. Because when people challenge patriarchy, they are not only challenging policies, they are challenging deeply rooted beliefs about gender, power, authority, family, religion, race, and whose humanity should be centered. This is also why people are often shocked by Supreme Court decisions that should no longer surprise us. A court shaped largely by originalist thinkers, appointed specifically because of their commitment to preserving conservative hierarchies, will often rule in ways that protect those hierarchies. That is not inconsistency. That is alignment. And we must understand this clearly before we begin imagining what comes next. Because we cannot build a different future while pretending the highest institutions in this country are neutral about the systems they were built to preserve. We have to have our eyes on rebuilding such courts. Here are some questions to reflect on. What institutions have you been taught are automatically objective or trustworthy? And what becomes possible once we stop confusing institutional authority with moral clarity? If this episode resonated with you, share it with someone who helps you think more critically and courageously about the systems shaping our lives. And remember, systems do not continue on their own, and they will not end on their own either. People choose to uphold them, and people can choose to dismantle them. We are learning how to do that work together.